Yeah. So the fact that you're helping is probably solid.
Yeah. Question mark.
Nice. Nice. Well, this is another episode of Ice Team Podcast. I'm excited about this one. You guys all know who's on my left, Drew. He's been on a lot of them. You've seen the guy across from me on a past podcast. You've seen this guy all over the interwebs, probably doing some type of fishing endeavor or the Crappie Chronicles, which we're going to talk about. Adam Bartusek, everybody. Adam's a good friend of ours. We've known you for, I don't know how long? It's been a while.
It's probably been about a decade now.
Yeah, got to know you. You've been the same height. I was going to say I knew you when you were little, but you're still tall.
Yeah, I've been the same height. I've grown a little in width, but that's about it.
We were just actually talking about ice armor suit sizes, so
God.
yeah, I think I'm holding my own. I don't think I've gone up much.
Before we jump into it too, we do have a Durham podcast, hopefully dropping within a week.
Yes.
Durham filmed one up north. I don't know who it was with, but I did get the call at about 7:00 at night, which typically happens when Durham films podcasts because he forgets how to turn on a GoPro or do any of that stuff. So, but he didn't call me after it, so I'm assuming it went well. He's actually sending me SD cards, so.
The good old snail mail SD cards.
Durham's alive.
This is easier than doing any other form of WeTransfer, Google Drive. It's just mail them to me, Durham.
Yeah.
Durham is alive. It's good to know. Well, he's probably out doing some guiding. I mean, they got ice up there in Park Rapids better than we do down here right now. So he's probably on the ice, I hope.
Yeah. Teaching. I don't know.
Yeah. Kindergarten.
Doing Durham stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure their ice is holding up pretty good too. From what I've seen, anything from St. Cloud north for the most part's fine right now.
Yeah. I was out around here a little bit over the weekend and we still had 8-9 inches of ice holding up. But the problem is the access points. Yeah. That's the lake I went to, I couldn't use the access I wanted to use. Not only was the access in jeopardy, but the area near it didn't look the greatest. And it wasn't so much that I was going to leave in the morning. It was what it's going to look like when I come back in the afternoon. Because like we went to Mille Lacs on Thursday, and we ripped out there, beautiful ice, right? Like not a lick of water. And we came back it wasn't that late, 3:00.
Yeah,
and puddles,
like
legit puddles all over the bridges, all over the shoreline. So that's the thing that concerned me a little bit on Saturday was it looks good right now, but I'm coming back in like 6 hours. And it could get interesting. So
the overnight where it freezes, drops below 32, it helps certainly. It's almost like puts a Band-Aid on the ice sheet, so to speak. But then if you get the cloud or like the fog, like I was up by Mille Lacs yesterday, we had some fog. Yeah. It was like cold. I was like, there's like frost on the trees. Like this feels great. But then I drove further south and it opened up to no fog, bright bluebird skies. And I was like, oh my God, like this is warm.
My kids played basketball yesterday outside in shorts and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
On February 4th.
There's no snow. They were losing all our snow cover too, which doesn't help.
We've never had snow cover.
There was some up north. There was
I'm saying down here.
Yeah, I know. It's been a bad year for ice. There's no doubt about it. But like you said, Adam, like in 10 days, there are some nice cold nights coming. I could see us growing some ice for, walking, maybe small ATVs and snowmobiles still. But
yeah. The 10-day forecast looks more appealing every day. Mm-hmm. We just have to get past the next 3 days.
Thursday or Friday. Yeah. We're going to get rain, and hopefully it gets cold quick after, and it'll grow. But the big thing is with this year, like I was kind of telling some of the guys in back before we came in, the thing is this year, if you're willing to go out and be safe, chisel, look around, the fishing is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Like I have never been on better bites than I've been on this year. It is incredible. The weeds are good. Fish in basins are good. Like they're not getting messed with. So like the bites are there and they're incredible. So if you can go out and be safe and do it, I like highly encourage it. Obviously, if you're going to like a Mille Lacs or Red or Leech or whatever, go out of a resort. I know there's public accesses everywhere and everything, but just go throw a resort $10 because it can go a long ways right now. Obviously everyone's struggling a little bit, but there's ice to be had, and like the extended forecast, it looks pretty good. So
the resorts are also like from our perspective and our actually experiences on Mille Lacs the other day, the resorts are putting bridges out over the dangerous cracks too.
Yeah, they know what's going on.
So they're also making sure you get to certain spots safely, and they check it every morning and do that stuff. So, to your point, resorts, safety, but I think what you're alluding to is they're struggling.
Yeah.
So if you and your buddies can throw $10 in a box for them on a Saturday morning, you never know. That $50 extra, that $200 extra, if another group comes through, can make a big difference for them resorts right now.
Yeah,
who are struggling big
for
time.
sure. And that, like, along with that, if you've ever thought about like, oh, I'm gonna, buy my kid a Vexilar next year for Christmas, go buy it right now, because you're never gonna get it. Like, I know everyone's like, oh, the St. Paul Ice Show prices. I promise you, they're cheaper right now.
Yeah.
You're never gonna get one cheaper. You can go get stuff, and you can help out all our retailers and everything. But yeah, so just go take advantage of all that stuff right now. It's not a wait for next year deal. Like, just deal with it right now. You'll be much happier about it by the time it gets to next year.
Agreed.
It's so hard to, like, obviously we want to think ice fishing as much as we can, but I was talking to Matt earlier. I'm like, dude, I think I could get my boat out this weekend. Like, you were saying, like, this might be the first time you can, like, walleye fish before the season closes in your boat.
Legit.
Like, not on the river.
Yeah.
I was
Like,
chatting
this is
with Noah
wild.
Schultz the other day, and I was like, we can go bass fishing probably
Dude,
for a week or two.
Yeah.
It's so weird. Like,
Yeah.
this won't happen again for a long time.
No.
We're living history right now, and that sounds cliche because it's technically always true. But now South Metro, I mean, what are they seeing? I mean, their ice has got to be in really tough shape.
I don't know. I haven't. I should check in with Sobe on it. I haven't been down in that area much at all lately. But when I was last down there, which was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, like right when the warmth started, it got bad very rapidly.
You relocated. That's right.
Yeah,
You're not down there anymore.
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I'm up by St. Cloud.
That's right.
now,
You
so
relocated to the West
I wasn't.
Metro.
Yeah, I haven't been down there lately. But when it started getting warmer, that stuff went bad really fast because they had more snow down there. So like all that, all the melting and just the sloppiness, and
Yeah.
they didn't have very much ice.
Yeah.
Like we had more ice in other areas. But there, like, man, there was sketchy areas. Like you only had 4 inches of snow in drifts, but once it got warm, there's only 5 inches of ice underneath it.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine South Metro down in southern Minnesota's struggling a lot more right now, but they're all worried about the pool for walleye bite anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're going to get some warm weather this week. I mean, I feel like we're a broken record on some of these podcasts. Like we joked about a second first ice.
And we're going to have a third.
We're going to have a third.
Yeah.
Like the spud bar has not left my truck the entire year. Usually by sometime early January, I feel like on a typical year that gets relocated into my garage.
Yeah.
It hasn't left the bed of my pickup truck this entire year. And I'm going to need it again next weekend to check ice. It's crazy.
Spud bar, ice picks, and ice cleats.
Yep. Your best friends.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And studs on the snow dog.
Yes. Yes. Matt needs new drywall screws.
I'm going through them quick. So Adam, you've been all over the place traveling. I think before we talk about the now, we should talk about a little bit of history. So if you watch one of our past episodes, we had Adam, Griff, Waldo, and Pink on last year. We cooked some food. Pink cooked us the crappie skewers.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, man.
Was
That
it
was
last year? Yeah.
Yeah, 2 years
2
ago?
years ago?
I don't know. One
I
of
don't
these.
know.
It was so good. It was tasty.
Oh, no, that was last
Yeah, last year. I'll
That
say this
was
is the second year of the
4
podcast.
first ices ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. True.
4 lifetimes ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so we kind of told the Crappie Chronicles too. I do want to dive a little bit into, you're kind of the brainchild behind it. I know it was one of your visions. I want to know a little bit about that, but I think we go back even further. One of the things we always like to do on this show is to dive deep into like what makes you tick, what got you into fishing. But I think it'd be kind of cool to let people know like how we all met, Adam and Clam. Media has been in your blood since inception with us. Like we met you when you were dealing with media, just like you are now. So it's not like you grew into this position. Maybe explain to us how you first came to the Clam family and what you were doing. I know the story, but I don't think our listeners do.
Yeah, for sure. No, I first came into the Clam family and just this whole brand in general it was like my freshman year at college. So that would have been 2013. So yeah, about a decade ago. Mm-hmm. My buddy, a lot of good friends of ours, Brent Lopez, had started a company called Team Yukon Outdoors. It was just a group of guys who fished together. Mm-hmm. And that's where, so originally it was like Sam Moore from Moore Media, who shoots stuff all over the country now. And then Brent Lopez, and then there was a couple other guys. I can't remember their names, though. But then that kind of ran its course after a couple of years. Sam went and worked for 13, if I remember right. And then Brent brought in, like, it was me, Sam Sobiek,
before he was Sobe.
Yeah, before he was Sobe, like we were just all buddies. And so Sobe, Will Stolsky, Andrew Osowski, Brad Schumacher. I'm trying to remember everybody, but there was a bunch of us basically who got into Team Yukon Outdoors, and that's like I came to my first pro day and stuff, but like I totally did not belong here. Like I was an open water bass guy. Like I didn't even have an ice suit, anything. That winter I ended up going up and ice fishing with Brent a little bit, and like I was wearing like my ice fishing or my bass fishing rain suit out ice fishing, and I was like, oh whatever, I'm only going to do this a couple times anyways. Well, over the years we started doing a little bit more content for Clam and like more ideas and all this, and then it started getting bigger. Fast forward after a while, Sobe gets hired by Alex Perrick when the whole Guggen Squad craze was going on. Sam was our camera guy, and I would go over and help Sam kind of look at footage and come up with the storyline and everything, because him and I were both kind of the creative guys like that. And then he just showed up at my house one day with the TYO camera gear, and he was like, I'm moving to Texas in 2 days. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah. So, and this was in like September, or October, and we had plans for like, it was going to be our second or third year filming ice fishing stuff, you know, and we're in our young 20s, still in college, or I had maybe just finished college at that point. But either way, he left, and my whole involvement with picking up a camera, video editing, everything basically started the moment Sobe walked out of my apartment. Because I never went to school for it. I never did any of that. I literally did it because I just cared so much, I would say, about like all my friends, and like it was all this team thing, and like someone needed to do it, and I was like, okay, I'll do it. And we ended up filming like, it was like 15 or 20 ice fishing videos that winter while I was working a full-time job. So like after work or whatever, I think I slept like 2 hours a night for that winter. That was also the winter, if you remember, we went out catfishing. That's when raids fell through.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And that's still well, I've watched guys fall through before. That's the only time I've watched someone fall through in February in like 20 feet.
Yeah.
So that was freaky. But yeah, so after all that, do TYO for a long time. And then I got burnt out. So I stepped away, just worked my job and bass fished. Then when I lost my corporate job because of COVID, that's when the whole me just starting to do media thing happened.
I'm glad. I remember when you were doing the final stages of TYO. I remember you came to my office one time, and burnt out was an understatement. You were working like 20-hour days.
Yeah.
I remember.
I was sleeping
you
like
you
2
had,
hours a night.
You had health problems.
Yeah.
Because of like I'm being dead serious. Like legit, like doctor telling you need to do less, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like you had legit health concerns.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, hours you're putting in.
Yeah. And I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I guess like that's the biggest thing. You get people asking about how do you get into the industry, or how do you do this, or the video work, or anything. I think a lot of people talk about how much work it is and everything, but you don't really get it. Like, how much you put in is really how much you get back. And that's where, like, you know, I think we ascended pretty rapidly in the industry. Well, that's because we were working 20 to 22 hours a day.
Yeah.
Like it was constant. That's the only thing we were thinking about. And we had all these goals, and like, it's not just something you turn it on for a little bit. Like
right.
It was turned up all the way. And my thing has always been, I like to push the envelope. Like I do stuff different. And in order to do that, like there's a lot of trial and error with it. So you're putting in extra hours compared to, like, if I just wanted to go film a regular fishing show, like, man, that's pretty easy at this point in time. I think it's just the stuff we do is so much different, you know?
Yeah. That makes sense.
I think like the untrained, like not going to school for media helps in a way. Because you kind of, like you're saying, it's trial and error. You figure out what works, and then being a customer as much as you are like a producer of the content helps out too. Because I've seen you, Adam, like where we're like taking photos or something, and you'll be like, what do you think of that? I'm like, that's pretty sweet. And you're like, yeah, that's what I was thinking. That was the first time I tried that. I'm like, yeah, like we see eye to eye on this stuff. You know, it's not like Like we understand what the customer wants to see. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know how to like, and I think that's kind of the new age of fishing media too, is, you know, for the longest time you had your old school cover photos and your old school
TV shows,
everything, right?
Yeah.
Well, and then when we first started filming the Chronicles and TYO and everything, we really leaned into the GoPros and like the POV style of like, you can see what I'm doing. And there's the older generation didn't necessarily like it because it's new,
Traditional.
It's not traditional, but I was like, this is where everything's going to go. I vividly remember sitting down with, like, coming in here when we were with TYO, like me and Sobe and Rello talk about this frequently. I remember coming in here, like our second or third year of TYO, sitting in front of like you, the marketing team and everything. And this is when Across the Ice Belt and like all those TV shows were huge and everything. And, you know, we're these young college kids or whatever. And we sit down and I remember looking at you guys and saying, I know we're going to sound crazy, but in 4 to 5 years, none of the TV shows that are going on right now are going to matter. It's all going to YouTube. And I still give you guys so much props for, I'm sure after the meeting you went and kind of laughed a little bit and all that. Like these kids
never laughed at you, Adam.
Frequently. But all these kids think they know what's going on, but you also listen to us and we're like, oh, they're onto something, and invested in us. And we had these new ideas and we went and did them. But it's just, and like I was saying, is the media now is so much more as it happens. Like a lot of our Chronicle photos and everything you see, like, you know how much I would love to take my GoPro off for a nice fishing picture and like get to have it, but it's like, no, dude, like I caught this fish. I'm going to get a picture of it and I'm going to put it back. Like,
it's real.
Yeah.
That's the strength.
It's real and it's showing that's what's going on. Like we chatted with Aaron Weeb the other day on our podcast, and like Aaron brought up, and I think it's so important, is, you know, we're continually learning about how to handle fish or how to film and how to do this stuff. And one thing Aaron's preached for so long that I can get on board with is like, not only is it just, you know, how do you film it and make it look cool, but it's like, okay, now we know how to do that and our camera equipment's so much better. Let's do a better job of like taking care of that fish so we get it back and it actually like lives. Because it's one thing to say catch and release and, you know, catch, photo, release or whatever, but if you're not handling the fish well, it's not going to live anyways. So
that makes sense.
I think there's a lot of that in it now, but that's the way we film it now. We do it quick, and I would love to get better photos sometimes because I'm the camera guy.
You do fine.
It works out.
I remember TYO, and I'll be honest, like you mentioned the old conversations and meetings, we were bummed when you guys split up. Like as Clam, like you guys were like, and honestly things happen for a reason, right? Like you guys all went your separate ways. Everyone's successful in their own right in some way, shape, or form now, right? That was a part of TYO.
Yeah, like Brent works for Elliott 2B now. Andrew works
Sobe's
for Vexlar.
Clearly does his thing.
Sobe, I'm doing this. Like Stolsky just moved to Argentina to guide for 2 months. Like there's guys all over the industry from that little group now. But anyways,
you guys did a great job, and I remember we were bummed because we're like, man, they were really crushing it. Getting some of your videos had tons of impressions, and you're right, you were ahead of the curve. Like you were doing things that the average ice angler or student of ice angling looked at and said, huh, them young punks, like, what are they doing? Like there was a lot of skepticism, right, at the time. But you guys stayed your course. And I remember one of the last years you guys had, when you were all intact, you had some pretty incredible numbers. Given the timing of things and the infancy of YouTube and everything, you guys were getting tens of thousands of views on some of your videos.
Oh, yeah. Like we were getting that. It's crazy to think back on it now. Because like what we're getting we're getting more views Chronicles now. But like what we were getting season 2 of the Chronicles, I would say, is what we were getting with TYO 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So like we've joked, you know, our group has talked before, and I'm like, man, if we could have ever figured out how to make sure Adam wasn't dying from trying to edit it all, and like if we could have, you know, we were so young too, so we had no idea how to actually work together or run a business or like anything. We're college kids. We have no idea what we're doing. So if we had any idea of how to do that, like, oh my God, how big TYO would be now. Like it's crazy to think about how big it actually would be, but then you also look at it and you go, you wouldn't have Sobe off with the Guggen squad and now being Sobe, you wouldn't have the Crappie Chronicles. You wouldn't have all these other things. So everything happens for a reason, but it is crazy to think back to.
I remember Sobe when some of the more intimate conversations we had with him in Clam, he was interned here.
Yeah.
He was an intern. I think,
it
was after TYO came to fruition with us. Mm-hmm. And he shadowed Brian Lindbergh, who was our graphics designer at the time. And I remember when I first met Sobe, real quiet, real reserved, just didn't talk a lot. And totally just very intriguing. Yeah, just very intriguing, right? Just very smart. You could tell, still is to this day. And then to see what he's become, it's like, holy cow. And I remember that when he was like, I'm moving to Texas. I'm going to go live in this mansion. I'm going to film this content. Did that for a couple of years and then left that gig, which people were shocked at. He left that gig to start Sobe as we know it today. And everything happens for a reason. But Team Yukon was cool. You guys caught some amazing fish. Your PB bluegill was caught.
Yeah, I haven't bluegill fished. We filmed a bluegill episode this year up in Lakes Country. And when we were catching them, I was looking at Waldo and I was like, dude, this is like the first time I've actually bluegill fished since I caught my 2-pounder.
Yeah.
Because, like, I don't know, why would you bluegill fish for me anyways, like what really gets me to tick is I like chasing the absolute biggest of something. And what's crazy is like I caught that 2-pounder and dude, it's hard to beat. Like, you're not going to beat that. No. So
did you know what it was?
Yeah, I knew the significance of it, but like I didn't truly know the significance of it. Like I knew how big of a deal it was because there's only a handful of guys who had caught one that big. I remember at that time, like John Hoyer, Spencer Samplowski, Brett Knutson, Clayton Davis, and some of those guys were posting these gigantic bluegills, and we got one on film, and like, I thought it was super cool. I was like, oh yeah, we just go like put effort in to do this, not realizing like how hard that actually is because you don't see pictures of those type of bluegills anymore. So yeah, that was crazy. That was me, Andrew, Andrew Osowski, Matt Waldron, Brent Lopez, and Aaron Knott were out there. And that was, it was like 35 minutes, I think. Andrew Spock caught a 1 pound, 13.7 ouncer about 20 minutes before I caught mine. And then there was another like 10 that were probably caught around us, like with the group that was out there. They were like 11 to 11 and a half inch.
How long's the 2-pounders? Like a 12-incher?
Yeah, 12-incher. Yep.
It's
like 12 and an eighth.
12 inches tall and long.
Yeah, it's stupid. It is so big.
Where can they watch it? I mean, it's still out there.
Yeah, like, the Team Yukon and YouTube page is still there. People still send me random DMs to this day of like, I just watched that video again. And yeah, and that's like kind of what's cool to see, I think, is we have fans of the Chronicles now that like started with TYO back in the day. And to watch the development of, filming and editing and everything going on, just in general with fishing, I think is crazy. Because like back in the day when we were even doing those TYO videos, those were considered kind of cutting edge, like drone video and slow-mo and various things going on. Well, now you look at it and there's so much more of it. So it's like, okay, how do you keep pushing the envelope or changing things? And I mean, you can even go the other way. Like Sobe now, if you watch his videos, you notice he's doing way more like vloggy, like cell phone filming style stuff. Like there's totally different ways to go about it. I just think the most important thing is just keep telling your story, but keep figuring out how to tell it differently. Yeah. I think that's so important because it's very easy to go down a road and just film the same fishing show that everyone's seen for the last 30 years. Yeah.
So what's the next thing? Like what's the trend right now? Where do you feel like it's going? Like what's the next thing in the world of YouTube creation that you're seeing is starting to
I think and it's something that we kind of showed with the Chronicles, and we're going to, I'm sure in the future, lean more into it. But I think you're going to see a lot more of the traveling stuff. Like that first started, like when Sobe was with the Guggens, that first started back in probably about 7 to 10 years ago. The guys started traveling the country, filming these fishing adventures and everything. Well, they weren't making any money doing it, so they were like, okay, I'm going to stay home and try to actually make some money. Well, now that companies actually invest into YouTube creators and stuff, and you're not just living off your YouTube income, I think you're going to see a lot more guys investing in those types of trips, because as we've seen after COVID, people got locked up in their house forever, and they're like, well, I want to go see more of the world and do more things, and a 14-hour drive isn't that big of a deal. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that, like destination filming and like that sort of stuff. And I think that's super fun to like stories to tell. Yeah. Like that's very cool. Very hard story to tell is catching an 18-incher in the Twin Cities metro area, because actually obtaining that fish is extremely difficult.
There's a show my kids watch on YouTube. I think it's called The Outdoor Boys.
Okay.
Does that sound familiar?
Dude, there's so many YouTube shows.
It's not a fishing show. It's a dad and his kids, and they go all over the world and camp and do different. I think it's called The Outdoor Boys.
Camping's
but their entire premise is travel.
Yeah.
Like one episode they're in Japan, one episode they're in Alaska, and you're right. Like even kids, so it's not just like adults gravitating towards that. It's just something new, different. You're vicariously living through those people as they travel. I mean, like the episode you guys did where Waldo and Pink had a walk through Boston.
Yeah, when we flew out to Maine.
I mean, I'm a fishing nut, so I like the fishing aspect of everything you guys do. But that one was one of the more entertaining ones for me, because I'm just like, these two putzes are wandering, and I know them both personally, right? So I just visualize like there's so much more going on than you showed, I'm sure.
Yeah,
like just their reactions and how they're thinking and what they're doing. That
I think we actually showed quite a bit. I mean, quite a bit of whatever the film I had, because I wasn't there, so I don't know what else happened. But yeah, I think it's a lot of people are living vicariously through other people now. And like when I first came in and pitched you guys the Chronicles, kind of one of the things behind it was I said I wanted to make a Netflix style series that was fishing. And in order to do that, it is a continual timeline or a goal or something going on and that's what fishing shows don't have, right? Like, I always think of In-Depth Outdoors. Like that was an industry standard for so long, in my opinion. I watched their shows until he retired. And that was, okay, we go here, film this bite, done. Plot's done. With the Chronicles now, it's this flowing, long plot. And I think they're so much fun to film, and they're just so different. So I think with, I guess when you ask like what's next, I think you're going to see a lot more of that, because, I mean, think of now, right? 5 years ago, there was all these Netflix, Hulu, whatever shows that everyone was watching, Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, all these shows. Dude, there's no good new shows coming out.
I think Bart just wants to be the whole part of the Netflix and chill generation.
Netflix and chill. Now.
Yeah.
Chronicles, like now is seen on. Okay, we digress.
I think the travel thing is really cool. I know you guys did the New York trip. Was that last year or 2 years? Maine last year. Because if I'm a person from like Maine, I can watch you guys a lot, and like, but at some point I'm just like, okay, they're still in the Twin Cities. Like I can't fully relate that to where I'm from.
Yeah.
But like personally living in the Twin Cities, I'm like, well, what the heck can these guys do that I can't do when I'm sitting on my freaking couch here watching them? Like, I think that's cool to relate to. And like, if you do the travel from West Coast, East Coast, or whatever it might be, like that'll like solidify a new audience for you guys. And then from there, the next step that I think is really cool is just live fishing.
Yeah.
We know that like fishing live is like hard to pull off because oftentimes you don't catch fish. But if you can pull it off, even just the event of not catching fish or trying, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
And it shows real content. Like you can't fake it.
Oh yeah,
you know
for
what I mean?
sure. Yeah, we've talked about that, and I think some level of live thing will eventually happen. Right now, you need the cost of it to come down in order to do it very good, in my opinion. I know Nick Linder's been doing it a lot lately, and it's been cool.
Well, you can produce it all through Facebook or whatever other streaming platforms you have, and I think people are used to seeing that, honestly.
Yeah.
Like we don't need like a Bassmaster live or anything like that, but just showing, oh, these guys are on Lake Minnetonka right now. They've been live for 3 hours. Like, that's sweet. Oh, I know that bridge. That's Arcola Bridge or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, it resonates with people.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you talked about traveling in the main thing and how you can connect to different people. One of the things I thought was unique on one of your main shows, we watched one the other day with the kids from last year. The bait shop scene. We went into
jack traps.
And the bait shop was full of those cross style tip ups.
Dude, those things
littered
also,
with them along the entire wall. And I think you have to work hard to find one of those here. And conceptually, they work here just the same, right?
Yeah.
There's no reason why it won't work here the same way. Now, you can't use infinite amount of lines like you can in some of the states out east.
No, yeah.
But still, just to look at the back, like when you were filming this, the back wall is like littered with these tip ups.
There was
littered with
10 rod and reel combos
Yeah.
in that bait shop. 10.
Yeah. And
there
hundreds
was
of
thousands of jack traps. Thousands. All handmade, wood carved, whatever. And they're super cool.
Yeah.
I bought one. I have one at my house. We've joked about using them.
And the young
and
kids
we probably
teaching you how
will
it works,
eventually.
and like that's his world.
Yeah, he's just like,
Like,
what are you
that's-
talking about? This is a jack trap. I'm like, you are not speaking my lingo.
And Griff probably walks up with a chronicle rod, and he's like, "What am I do with that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Spring bobber? What?"
No, like Drew said though. I think connecting with your audience and everything, like you said, right? We film in the Twin Cities metro and do this. We haven't done it very hard in about a year and a half now, so I think people are refreshed and everything on it. But I think it's important to keep people staying refreshed. So like last year when we go up to northern Minnesota, well, people like that for a little bit and then it kind of fades off. Oh, and then we go to the UP and people really like that. And I think it's also a thing where, like, say you've never been there, you get to live vicariously now through these people you've grown a bond, you feel like you've grown a relationship with watching them. So you get to watch them travel to this new place, and you're like, well, if he liked this, I'm going to like this. And a lot of times now, when we have our meetups or we see fans around or whatever it is, very rarely is what someone's saying they loved one of the fish catches or like the big fish or anything like that. It's much more often, I use this technique that you talk about all the time and I finally did it and I loved it, or I bought a schoolie rod. I never thought I'd do it and oh my gosh, this is so much fun. Or it's, gosh, when you guys went to the UP or when you went to Maine, or everybody loved the Otter Tail County stuff. So like that sort of stuff, when you went there, that was so cool. So, yeah, I think you're going to see us hopefully do a lot more of that. I mean, the plan was for us to do a bunch more of it this year, but with, like we let off with the weird ice season, you got to kind of change things up a bit and make sure you dedicate.
The audience
correctly.
is like exploring through your guys' lens essentially, but you still have like the crappie fishing as like the standard, set in stone. Like, that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
I love watching the hunting public shows where they'll do like the Minnesota tour for like 4 episodes, and then they'll be like, oh, we got to tag over in Ohio or something. Then it's 4 episodes, but ultimately like they're still hunting like whitetail deer.
Yeah.
Like it's just awesome. It shows you all the different techniques, tactics, whatever, but then you can try to relate it to wherever you live.
Yeah, I think
fun.
that's huge, is like we can't, and I think creatively it's important that everybody remembers you can do whatever you want. It's your own story. Make it up however you want to go and however you want to tell it. But what I think is important, and like you led to, Drew, is you need something to stay the same. Something has to stay constant if you're going to continually change and do stuff. So for us, the one thing that stays constant is chasing the biggest crappies ever documented on film. Now, like we said, we will continually revisit that storyline of trying to catch that 18-incher within 60 miles of Minneapolis. And we're going to constantly do it. But the other thing is, like just being straight up honest with how big we've gotten now. Like we have to like do it for a little bit and then leave and stuff, because like we get a lot of people following us.
Yeah,
So
lakes will get pounded if they know you're on them.
yeah, exactly. Like the word gets out and all of a sudden people show up, and like that's why I have to hold film for some videos for a bit, and like we do a lot of stuff to try to make sure we're taking care.
Your GPS trails on your snowmobiles.
Yeah, I know, that's right. I forgot to do that. I
last
gave
year.
it to you.
We had to borrow the snowmobile that Adam had from Polaris to go to Canada with.
Yeah.
And I was like, sent you a video. I'm like, hey, dude, you didn't erase your trail.
He took a picture.
And I was like, delete it. I'm like, don't have to worry about me, dude.
yeah.
Those are spots that we hit that later that one.
I don't know.
See, you guys are missing the boat. Like you know, big crappie this, big crappie that. Pink is the real star of your show.
Yeah, the cooking.
The cooking aspect is what really gets me going. I mean, and it's not so much, and I've told this, I did a little piece with where I went to school down in Mankato. One of my friends interviewed me for a fishing/cooking piece. And one of the things she asked was like, okay, what are some other ways to cook fish? Like not the traditional. And I basically just said, you need to look at this guy named Ryan Pincala, go to the Crappie Chronicles and see what he does, because I think it's so cool how he comes up with different ways to cook fish, very abstract ways to cook fish. And like things like when he made the heroes. With crappie meat instead of
the Euros
meat.
Were unbelievable.
I watched that and I looked at, I'm like, wow. And I've had him cook for me before in the bed of a pickup truck or whatever. And I mean, I think that guy, everyone's got, like, you're an expert in your field of work, right? Videography, fishing, Griff, right? Arguably the best big crappie fisherman on ice the world's ever seen, right? Everyone's got their specialties. That dude is that level in the world of exotically cooking crappie. Yeah, I mean, the guy's in a whole different planet.
Wild game in general, I would say, because he's even done it with because he has his series he's doing on his YouTube now called The Meat Season that he's working on. He's got a bunch of content for it. He just needs to come out with it. But we had antelope burritos one time that he literally got cactus from out there and brought and did that. He just thinks so creatively about it. And I think that's what makes the Chronicles so good is, like you said, you have Ryan with his extreme talent, thinking creatively, cooking, and we don't film something cooking unless he's like, this is how I want to do it. It's going to be, I'm pumped about it. This is how it's going to work really well. You got, like you said, Griff probably, in my opinion, him and Clayton Kettering are the two best pan fishermen probably. Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe in the country right now. I don't really know because I haven't seen a bunch of others, but they are substantially better than everybody else you'll ever fish with. And you got Waldo, who's insanely talented as well, but his deep dive into studies, weather, everything just helps so much. And you got me with the video and storytelling and all that, and
you can cut a good hole, and you're really good with forward facing sonar too.
Yeah, I've looked at it a lot.
It's funny, so you say Griff and Clayton, and when you look at those guys, I'm like, they're phenomenal ice anglers, but I keep thinking forward facing sonar, you got to run and gun, hard work, effort, on your feet all day. But those dudes, they just make the best decisions possible and read their electronics so well. They're not running around that much.
No.
They'll just sit by the snowmobile, and look at their forward face and be like, that's one right there. And they'll just wait another minute and be like, there's two more behind them. They're going this way. I'm going to go fish them. Yep. Where I would be just kid in a candy store. It's oh, there's one right there. I'm going to run over there and try to drill a hole.
There's a school punch on it.
Yeah, exactly. They're just no, that's not the one.
Yeah.
They're just so good at that.
Usually I've learned the times I fish with Adam Griffith and Clay Dog's the same way, and Bart knows better than me. If Adam kneels down by his forward facing sonar for a period of time,
he's studying fish.
There's something going on.
Yeah.
If he's because otherwise he'll move, right? He'll punch another hole and check. See, if you look over and you're Griff hasn't moved in 5 minutes, he's about to wave you over. You know it's coming. He's found something that's intriguing.
Yeah.
And Clayton's the same way. You'll see him moving around. He'll punch a hole. He'll scan, move another 40 yards, punch a hole, scan. Now, when he's off the machine, on his knees by the ice, without a rod in his hand, I almost always know he's about to mean business.
Yeah.
Something interesting is about to happen. And I learned that with Griff too. He'll just sit and watch fish.
Oh my God.
Watch him and not even try to catch him. Just study them for 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's
where
crazy.
the average angler will see them fish and they'll go punch on them. Almost always.
Well, a lot of guys nowadays, even if they have, let's say, live scope or mega or whatever active target, they just think having it is going to catch them the fish, and they might be able to find the fish, but then they it's I've seen people not even I know the fish are, let's say, 20 feet here, and my buddy will be 20 feet this way, and I'm like, why are you fishing there? You are not going to catch fish unless you go to where they're at. Mm-hmm. They just don't click that extra step to use this to present your bait in front of the fish or where the fish is going.
Right.
You know? And I think there's a huge thing that I think we show, but I mean, there's certain levels as well, but I would say there's a lot of people who are starting to get live and forward facing, and they're starting to use it. But there's a lot of people that don't understand how to use it like to its peak level. And a lot of that also comes with like you have to work your ass off. Like that's very honestly true. Like
hard work,
we like I get home from filming and I'm sore. Like I'm tired. I feel like I just went and worked out for like 4 hours because it's constant movement up and down, up and down. And there's no like, you know, someone looks over and they're like drill and they're like, no, you missed 5 feet over, and you look at them like there's no second guessing that. You're like, okay. And you just like the guy who's running it, like you listen to him. It's a total team approach. Like you don't second guess it. Yep. But I think there's also now you're starting to get a lot of guys like going and doing that because, you know, that's what we and other people have showcased. Well, then you have the Adam Griffiths and the Clayton Ketterings and guys who sit there and study fish and know how they move, and they can go, those guys are chasing largemouth. And you're like, well, how do you know that? It's like, just the way the fish are acting. And you're like, they're never going to catch up to them. So they're going to chase them all day.
Seen that?
We've seen that.
and things like that. Or like you start chasing crappies, or like, for example, me and Griff were out on a lake the other day, and just how much you learn about fish, right? And especially, dude, big crappies are so smart. Like they do, them and big bluegills, like they do not get enough credit for how intelligent they actually are. And we were out on a lake the other day, just, I mean, beating the brakes off of big ones. And everybody will see the footage eventually, but it legitimately one of the best days of fishing I've ever had in my life, if not the best. And we're about the only ones out there. There's a few other people out there on feet, but like they're a long ways away and just doing whatever. 2 snowmobiles show up and start doing the live thing and hopping around. The fish shut down within 10 minutes. Our bite got insanely harder. And they were 300, 400 yards away. But all of a sudden they hear noise and they're like, I know what's happening. And they're just, and they don't like leave.
And you guys
they're just
were on
like,
foot.
Yeah, we were on foot. Well, we had driven, or actually, no, we walked out there. But we could have driven a machine out and then like, that's the thing. We have our Polarises and we rip them around and stuff. But you'll often see with us, we get to where we're going. We notice there's fish around. Turn them off, and we're on foot now. Like, we don't hop around as much as other people do on their machines.
That I noticed that last time I went fishing is we were pulling up to areas, and I had the live mounted on the back of a sled, and I'd drill a hole right by the sled, look down, and I'd like see 3 fish right away, but then I'd like run over, drill a hole, and then they'd be gone. And I'm like, man, am I going to catch up to these things? Then after the second or third time doing that, I'm like, well, I think I need to just like drill my holes right away, let things calm down, take the live off the machine, then go walk. And at that point is when we started seeing fish that we could actually catch. Yeah. Because they weren't freaked out from the engine running or just all the commotion. Like you just got to let things cool down a little bit.
Well, and like people say, oh, well, back in the day, we just let our trucks run or, you know, ice houses run or whatever, and we were still catching fish. Yeah, you were then because they weren't getting chased with forward-facing sonar and all these other things. Like they never had this going on. They didn't have people chasing them. Well, fish evolve over time, right? So now they're used to getting chased or they're used to this noise. So once that starts happening, it's going to get harder. Like, in my opinion, wheelhouse fishing is just going to keep getting harder and harder and harder over the coming years just because of noise levels. Like if you can decrease your, I just never ever thought how much noise made an impact on fish, and even just your footsteps, like
ice cleats.
It's yeah, and that's the thing. Like you were talking about earlier, like safety equipment, ice cleats. Dude, I never wear ice cleats because the only thing that happens is I walk all the way out there, and then I have my ice suit on and everything, and I got to take them off, and that's such a pain. I'd rather just waddle my way out there. So.
Especially this year with how little snow and actual ice we have.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Any commotion's bad.
Well, and that's the thing, right? So you're supposed to have ice cleats when there's no snow to get traction on. Well, that also is when you don't want to make any noise. Yeah, so they're freaking out. So you need to figure out how to be stealthy. And yeah, like I said, with how intelligent fish are, I was telling this story to Weeb the other day. Griff and I have been out on a lake before where they're used to getting chased by a forward facing now. And we were watching them, and you take 2 steps towards them, they're gone. Like, they know everything, like the auger setting down, all of it. They know, and they're out. And we were just curious what would happen. He took his truck. This was like 2 years ago now. He took his truck, drove over to them, and I like pointed, and he drove over to them. They didn't move. Opened his door, didn't move. Moment his feet set down on top of the ice, gone. And that's like, you think of that, like,
so driving the truck wasn't a noise that intimidated them or scared them.
They know they're not going to get caught by that noise. They keep getting driven over all the time.
I think they just like rusted Chevys personally.
It could be that.
Yeah.
I still want to see
dude.
those. Dude, those, like, in terms of marketing content, I want to see those pictures of Griff by his truck somewhere
awesome.
sometime. The old school.
Just the typical ice fisherman.
The
Kinda
typical
half
ice
rusted
fisherman.
out vehicle, big deal.
Yeah.
Fish right out the door. It's great.
Holding a nice 15-inch crappie.
Yeah. I gotta say, Griff, keep your feet off the ice though when you do that next time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll scare them away.
Yeah.
And it's funny because that's almost like the second we think we know what they want or don't want, we then get put in place too. I mean, I've seen it so many times. Like, there was a time where, driving around, to contradict kind of what you said just a little bit, we would drive around to spook the fish towards other people.
Yeah, hurt them.
Yeah, we would drive, like, many, many, many times if I'd done that, I'd used to hop on the wheeler, I'd have clients set up in fish traps, and I'd go rip around the circle and push all the fish right back towards the fish traps.
Yeah.
So it's like, and then like on Lake of the Woods, for example, it's almost like there's days the closer you are to the main drag, the more fish you catch. Where the most traffic is ripping up and down, I've seen it to where the houses on these resorts closest to the plowed roads are the ones that do the best some days.
Lake of the Woods is such an anomaly, man.
Yeah, there's so many trucks driving over those fish.
I was talking to my girlfriend about this the other day because we've gone wheelhouse fishing, I don't know, maybe half a dozen times in the last few years. And she's like, I don't really like it. Like, we just never really catch that much. But we're like going to good lakes, like your premier walleye lakes in Minnesota, but not Lake of the Woods. And I'm like, I think you need to do a Lake of the Woods run because like we will catch fish. Yeah. You just like throw your house anywhere and you're in the game, Yeah. Whereas like you go to a more of a natural, like deeper clear water lake and it's like, you better be on the juice and you better be fishing at prime time.
Yeah.
Otherwise you might not catch anything.
I mean, I caught some nice Lakewood walleyes on Mille Lacs on Thursday.
Oh my God.
12
to
14 inches.
Yeah. They almost stretched the bucket.
Yeah. I did catch a couple big ones, but yeah.
There are a lot of smaller walleyes showing up in Mille Lacs. I haven't fished it a ton lately, but I'm like, there's a bunch of like those.
There's just a lot of fish in that lake again.
Yeah. And the perch are bouncing back.
Mm-hmm. I mean, quite a few perch.
There's some nice perch caught with us. I did see the group that went out this weekend, both multiple groups, Studer as well.
Yeah.
Nice perch were caught again. So when I was in high school, the perch fishing on Mille Lacs was phenomenal. Late 90s, like it was nothing to go out there and get 12s and 13s and buckets of them. And then for the better part of 20 years, it was like no one even talked about perch on Mille Lacs. And I feel like the last few years, we're seeing a definite bounce back in the perch population of quality fish. I mean, Tommy caught one that was 13 and a half that we didn't weigh it, but that thing was well over a pound. Pound and a half.
Yeah, that was
pound
a
and
big
a half perch. I mean,
we were like Lake Cascade. What?
Yeah, it was
when that thing came up.
The thing was a blimp. And so, and I saw Derek Kunkel on Saturday sent me a picture of a 13-inch perch he caught on Mille Lacs, and so you're starting to see some of those big perch bounce back, which is kind of cool. It gives people an opportunity where you go to a lake where you can only keep one walleye. Now you maybe get that one slot walleye that's 21 and a half inches. Well, then boom, you get 5, 6, 7 perch to go with it.
You got a nice meal.
You got a meal.
Yeah. So. And I think, I mean, like you bring up, like it for the last 20 years, right? It hasn't been the same perch fishery. We've seen the exact same thing happen with red lake crappies.
Mm-hmm.
So like, obviously we documented that last year and it came out now. And there's a bunch more people going up to red to experience those crappies. I think I was talking with Drew about this. He went up there recently and it's so much fun. But I think, like we said with that, I mean, the same thing can be taken for the Mille Lacs perch now, right? If they're starting to rebound, I don't know, whatever's going on there. But people just need to remember when they go out, like fishing is a privilege. We all get to do it for, and have fun and enjoy our time on the lake. Like when you go out there, it's a privilege. Take care of the resource, because as more technology keeps coming and everything, Like we're catching more fish now. That's just the way it is, and that's fun. But because you're catching more fish doesn't mean you need to constantly keep them.
Right.
Like we show often with the Chronicles, we keep fish. We eat fish a lot. We show different ways to cook it. However, there's 4 of us. We don't keep 40 crappies. Between the 4 of us, we maybe keep 12 to 16. And that's, you're cooking crappies a different way now. With what Ryan's doing, whether it's tacos or casserole or I don't know, all the other things he does. Well, when you're not just having a fish fry where that's literally the only thing you're eating, it's like, oh, I'm having this casserole that fish is a part of. You're not using nearly as much fish. So I think it's just important that, if these places are coming back and everything, the more I can preach selective harvest, I think the bigger thing. Like we went from everybody fills buckets to catch and release everything. It's like selective harvest is good. We need to keep smaller fish to make sure fish grow big. Like that's literally shown with genetics how that works. But just make sure you take care of places. I think that's very important.
It's funny you mentioned the casseroles and stuff. Our big thing at our house is Hawaiian buns.
Yeah, I think you
take a piece of fish and throw it in a Hawaiian bun with a piece of cheese, and it's amazing how much less fish you eat.
Yeah.
So like my kids will do 2 sliders. Well, no, that's 1 crappie. Yeah. 1 fillet on one side, or maybe not even a whole one. And they're full. They're not eating 6 or 7 fish. But you make a good point. If we just go hard on a fish fry and fill a basket of fried fish, you go to town.
Dude, I can pulverize 10 bluegills.
Yeah, it's like eating popcorn. It's like eating popcorn. So, you're right. When you add it to something else, that's a good thing. Like, our big thing, like I said, I go to the store, I'll grab a pack of Hawaiian buns. Each member of the family gets 2 or 3 buns, couple slices of cheese. Here's a few pieces of fish, and they're full.
Yeah.
So
I wonder, it's a good question. How many, what do you think percentage of fish were harvested in Minnesota this year compared to, let's say, 2 years ago?
Fraction.
Yeah,
a quarter.
There's no one fishing.
I know. Like, think of the wheelhouses that aren't just sitting over the community holes, catching fish. Like,
hey, I will tell you, it is unbelievable going out around the metro right now, and like
no one.
We pride ourselves on finding pressured fish, and we've done a lot of seminars on it and everything. It's crazy. You go out this year and you like go to your pressured areas and you're like, man, there's no fish here. You're like, I wonder if they're in this prototypical basin that they've never been in in my life. And you go out there and they're in a school of 200 and they're all big, and you're like, oh my God.
I fished a lake
they're
on
actually
Saturday,
acting normal.
a very popular metro lake on Saturday. Had it to myself.
Yeah.
Had the entire lake to myself on February 3rd. Not one person. And it was like stealing candy from a kid.
Yeah.
These fish didn't even know what's going on. I mean, you could catch them whatever you wanted.
Yeah, they show up and they're like, it's about time.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, it's and I've noticed this year too, like to your point, the fish are grouped up. They're in their traditional winter spots. And they're holding more to traditional in-fisherman book style structure.
Yes.
Just your basic like edges of basins. Why would I check the edge of the basin? I never check the edge of the basin. Like the Shantytown USA is in the basin. I go up onto a flat or in the weeds or with this. No, they're just running the basin edge, and you can follow them with forward-facing sonar. And you're like, this is the most like textbook location of fish ever.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And they eat.
Yeah, there's nobody else out there. It's great.
Yeah. Remember when we went out 2 weeks or a week ago and we like dropped our stuff off, and I'm like, well, I don't really think this is where we want to be. Like the big ones won't be here. It's too much of a community hole, but we just checked there first. I'm like, well, let's just drill a hole for fun to make sure like nothing's here, And then very first fish, you caught like a 12.5 incher. And I'm like, what?
Drew
like,
is so confused. He's just like,
this is the nursery, dude. Like, this is not where the big ones should be. And then we caught like another, like a small bluegill after. And I'm like, yeah, they ain't going to be here. We're going to go check out the half dozen other spots on the lake. Checked them all. I'm like, they ain't there. So then we went right back to our starting spot, and then we continued to pound like big ones. Yeah. I'm like, this is not how it should be. This is too easy.
It just shows how much of an effect we do have on fisheries, and like, like I've said, how smart they get. Like we've been on some very big fish recently that you get there and it's very obvious they have not been targeted. And you're like, oh, sick. And you have an unbelievable first 2 hours. And then you can watch them get smarter. Mm-hmm. You can watch them start to break up a little bit. You can watch them see a bait get dropped on them, come up to it and be like, no, and like go away, and you're like, ooh.
And that's just the 4 of
Yeah.
you putting pressure on them.
That's just the 4 of
Not
us. So now
30 or 40 people.
Yeah, now you think about permanence and all this other stuff. Like, it's just crazy how smart some fish are. Like I said, Griff and I were out on this place the other day. Very, very pressured fishery that has some very large crappies in it. But we go out there and we're catching real big ones, and they will only eat this specific colored pinhead. We tried other variations. They will not eat anything else. We've tried plastics, everything. They like shy away from it and all that, but they'll eat this specific size one. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to drop a blade jig down with a minnow on it. They'll eat it. Like, this is always what we do for fish that are tricky and whatever. And it was unbelievable. I dropped down a blade jig with a minnow, and Griff watched my hole on live get a cone around it of fish that backed away. And I was like, what just happened? And he's like, dude, they haven't been pressured by wheelhouses this year. But all of a sudden, you put a minnow down with the jig head, and they were like, wheelhouse. And they backed up and were like, I'm getting away from
There's
here.
a bobber on this one.
I know this trick. And you're like, okay. And I tried it on another hole. They did the same thing. I was like, all right, no minnow today, baby.
And obviously there's 0 wheelhouses on the lakes now.
No, there's none. I haven't seen a wheelhouse all year.
I remember reading articles a couple years ago. They're talking about how the fish in a lake totally changed. It was, let's just call it, there was the 5 of diamonds or whatever daredevil that was always the king bait. And then after 10 years, they wouldn't touch it. Like a person wrote an article on this. It was like pike, or I forget what species it was, but it was very evident where the fish just stopped eating that. And I'm just like, how does a fish really, do they adapt that fast? 2 generations of fish or whatever it might be, to not eat a bait? And how do they do that?
Dude, we had a lake that we filmed a video on, just blasted them on a pinhead.
Yeah.
And we did 1/8 and 1/16, and they were all really big. I filmed it a little bit of the wrong way. Some people figured out the lake. So a bunch of people all of a sudden showed up. And we caught them on pinheads. They're now using pinheads. We let the lake rest or whatever for, a month or 2. By rest, I mean, there's just a bunch of people out there in portables. And we're like, well, these fish are smart. They're just going to swim away from them. No one's chasing them. So we'll let the pressure go away. Well, we let the pressure go off for a month or 2. And then we're like, hey, we'll go back now. We go back there. They're acting the same way they've always acted. However, if you drop a pinhead on them, they just go away. You drop a horizontal bait, like a jig in a plastic, they're like, all right, and they come in and eat that. So you're like, okay, they got smart. They got caught.
I've seen fish on the same lake change day to day between what color they want.
Yeah.
But in general, for the entire population to supposedly just not want to eat that anymore, it's how does that happen? I've seen even our cabin.
A fish's whole job is just to not get eaten. So, they start seeing their friends get caught and all these things going on. It changes. I could be crazy, but I've seen it enough happen that it's a real thing.
I bet I'm not a biologist. I feel like I've said it so many times on this podcast, but
we all know. It's okay.
I feel like the conditions of the lake will change a fish. Let's say the water is clear because of zebra mussels. Maybe there's less zooplankton. Well, maybe the fish aren't sitting in that basin anymore. Maybe they've learned to travel up into the weeds more and chase minnows. Because I feel like that's happened in our cabin lake. Some spots that are just juicy, a decade ago, they don't even get fished anymore because the fish just aren't there.
Yeah, but there's also the thing of your presence and pressure is a condition of the lake. That's something you don't take into account. Well, a lot of people don't take into account, right? Your whatever bait gets dropped down a bunch of times, that is now a condition of people are using this. They will get trained to this. Just think of when the A-rig first started, right? They never seen it before. You catch them, this is bass fishing, but you just start pinwheeling them on it. Now all of a sudden, A-rig isn't necessarily the best bait at certain times, and it's a lot trickier now to get them to eat it. It's the same way with baits. Fish adapt. That's why, Clam Pro Tackle exists and all these tackle companies exist, and they keep changing products because fish get conditioned to stuff over time. So with, I feel like that's something we film a lot is your presence on a lake affects fish a lot more than you realize it does. And I think this year, like, is what puts the trump card on that and shows, yes, this is extremely apparent. Like we were just saying, you go out to lakes that have been getting absolutely pounded for the last 20 years, and somehow it keeps pumping out big ones, and you're like, well, I wonder if there's big ones in there now. Well, yes, not only are there big ones in there now, they're all in one school.
Yeah.
And you're like, how is this even possible? But then you pressure them for a couple days, and you watch them all break up, go solos, and then they go mull around the lake, and you're like, okay, now they're back to doing what they do when they get pressured. Granted, we're the ones who put the pressure on them, but now they, they're like, okay, and they go disperse.
Well, you also take into consideration a winter like this where we have no snow, thin ice. I mean, one of the reasons we're seeing a difference in situations in terms of where fish located is just that. We've only had one UPL event this year. We had the first one canceled. There's a good chance the third one's going to get canceled. We had one 2 Sundays ago on East Rush Lake. A lot of our listeners probably know what the Rush Lakes are like, right? West and East Rush. A lot of people fish them. Full of fish, super fun. You're not going to go out there and probably get your Crappie Chronicle size 16-incher, right? But they're fun. But one thing we noticed in this year's tournament, 23 years of the UPL, we fished East Rush Lake 7, 8 times, 10 times in 23 years. It's very, very, very easy to tell you where teams are probably going to win the tournament. It's been very consistent every time we fished it. Throw it all out of the equation this winter. All these fish, there were nothing was going on the basin, which is usually where teams go to quickly get their milk run. The shallow weeds weren't as prevalent as they once were. All these guys and gals were fishing the edge of the basin in 12 to 15 feet of water. Areas that just have traditionally not produced, definitely not the winning bag style of fish. That's where they all were. They were running that transition line. They were as confused as any other species, human thing in existence this year, because they've never seen this type of winter either.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden we have ice, we have no ice, we have no snow, we have lots of light penetration. What the heck is going on? Like, these fish are definitely in their own little world as well. I'd be interested to see if our findings and our thoughts on school pattern, big fish schooling up, whatever, would be consistent if we had different ice conditions and snow conditions, but no pressure, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So is it contributed to just the angling pressure? Or are we not thinking about all the other conditions that come into play too? Like, do you think you'd still catch them big fish schooled up if there was 20 inches of ice and 7 inches of snow on the lakes?
I don't.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I have
so is it just
idea.
the angling pressure, or
I
is
would
it
think it would be
all
way
of the
easier
conditions?
to catch them if you had some snow cover right now. Because the one thing that is very true, in my opinion, this year that we've noticed is, like, you can go catch a bunch of really big ones, but getting them to bite is very hard this year. They're way more picky. So I don't know if it's, like you said, no snow cover and stuff, like they can just see better. Or I don't necessarily know what it is, but we've noticed a lot of fish that are way more picky. Like, we can, we'll get dialed in on a bait and color, and then we can start catching them better. But, like, I'm getting denied way more this year than I have in previous years. However, there's so many big fish schooled up that, like, I get denied 4 times, and the 5th one comes in, and I'm like, well, this one will bite. And then I catch that one.
So, are you seeing these fish higher off the bottom, closer to the bottom? Like, in terms of, like, how you fish these bigger fish this year compared to past years where there's like, are they hugging the bottom more because they're more finicky? Are they still suspended?
No, they're, like, suspended.
So
like,
they're
they've
same
never
areas, same zone.
Yeah, but
just
different
feeding
areas of
differently.
lakes. Yeah, it just seems like you can look at them and be like, you haven't been pressured.
Yeah.
Like, they're just all schooled up. They're hanging out. You drill on them for like 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden it's like the thought registers that they're like, oh, winter's here. And they, like, they start.
Are you guys
breaking
seeing
up.
more like underwater, like weeds and stuff this year than prior years?
We had way more. I mean, I feel like the first 5 or 6 videos we filmed this year were predicated on weeds.
I would think that with the lack of snow and ice, the weeds are way better, which means there's more sunlight, more oxygen, like healthier shallows, which means like more smaller bait fish, whatever, and maybe the crappies are eating more natural forage, right? Like,
Yeah,
that
it could
lake
be.
should be healthier. It's like the opposite of a winter kill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and there's
Like
I mean,
maybe
even
they're
you think
full.
about your sunlight penetration and everything. The bug hatches at night are way better right now too.
They're
Like
crazy right now.
yeah, there's a bunch of different stuff going on.
Yeah,
These fish are growing exponentially.
Maybe a
right
crappie's
now.
just like, man, I've been eating bugs and minnows all night. Like, you can take your piece of zinc alloy. Like, I'm fine.
Well, even the Mille Lacs walleye guys are telling you that the sunrise sundown bite is not near as good as past years because of the insect hatch. I just saw guys posting the other day on social media saying how much they're seeing insects coming out at night during twilight prime time right now when they usually don't, and it has to be contributed to some of that.
Yeah,
And they're saying
I'd
like
imagine.
usually the best time to fish Mille Lacs is that prime time. Well, now you're hearing it from many people that 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. is your prime time on Mille Lacs right now for walleyes. And I mean, I think if it has to contribute some of that to light penetration, changing
You're
conditions.
talking out on the mud.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like, it's crazy. Every time I post about Mille Lacs, people are like, yeah, I fished at sundown, didn't catch anything, but at 1 PM, I slayed them.
Yeah. Interesting.
So I just think we're writing a chapter in the book this year that none of us has ever seen.
No, I think the
I mean,
lakes are
we-
going to be healthy, though,
Yes.
these next few seasons, just on lack of pressure and the light penetration, oxygen. Like, no lake should winter kill this year.
Well, last winter,
No.
the lakes didn't get beat on in the winter either because we had a lot of
No,
snow.
and the winter kills we got were very helpful.
Yeah.
They were good.
You need a winter
kills.
kill once in a while to weed out stunted fish, right? Like,
Yeah.
but
If I had to preach on anything for like this is for the coming years from people, and this is just from what I've seen, please look into investing in replicas because right now and like really think about putting trophies back because right now, at least around here, there is a very large trophy class of fish that is currently growing that people have not been pressuring. And I don't know if the state record will get broken because that's like 5 pounds. But in the coming years, you're going to see some of the biggest crappies anyways you've ever seen caught. And it's just the combo of lack of pressure, good spawns. We got a winter kills at the right time. Like
Anglers figuring it out, having the tools.
yeah, anglers figuring it out and getting the tools. So that's why I'm saying like I even said in the red video, right? Like, okay, I'm this person out on this lake. I just caught, a 18-incher. I'm going to get it mounted. I'm the only, it doesn't have that big of an effect. I'm the only one. Well, guess what? There's probably 10 to 15 other people who, say there's 10 or 15 other people who have a permanent out there and they each catch 1, 2. Dude, there's not 118s in a lake. There's like 20. You just took them all out. So like, just put it back, let it go do its thing. Someone else can catch it. Take some good photos. Like, all these people who do replicas, they're so good at it. And it's way more satisfying to do that. It lasts up way longer. I just really want to preach that because I can already see what's coming. It's going to be really good. A lot of people are going to have a lot of fun. I just cannot stress enough. Please put the big ones back because we are going to see some generationally good fishing in the coming years.
Yep.
And yeah, that it's
Throw a
very
picture
big
up.
thing.
Throw your picture up next to the replica on the wall. If you're worried about somebody saying you didn't catch that, throw your picture up next to it.
Yeah, I just don't get, I guess for me, right? Like, and the videos will be coming out soon, but like I've had legitimately the best days of fishing I have ever had in my life recently. Like, just, I don't know if I've been lucky or what's going on, but we've been on some crazy bites. I've got some crazy big fish. And I've put them all back. And at no point in my brain did I ever think I'm going to keep this and get a mount. And maybe it's just I grew up in a different generation or something like that. I don't know. But for me, it's always been like, if I want to get it, I'll get a replica. I have a replica of that 2-pound bluegill. And guess what? The paint and everything looks just like it. The body's a little bit wider than mine was. However, I look at it and I still go, I remember that.
Yeah.
Because you're getting that mount not to like, you're not displaying this fish necessarily of like, look at how much, as dumb as it is to say, look at how much of a man I am. I got and kept this, It's more of like you keep it to look at it and go, that was an awesome day.
I remember that.
And I don't need the exact fish there to do that, you know?
It's funny. I had a client 2 Sundays ago get a 15.5-inch crappie in the Metro. And on a guide trip, that's a giant fish, right? It's one thing. It's one thing to do our
over
own.
14 is big.
Oh yeah, it's one thing to do our thing and go scope one with 2, 3, 4 guys on our own. Different story. But when you're guiding somebody that this guy used a pinhead for the very first time that afternoon, right? So we're not talking like this guy's out there all the time chasing megas and understands. He gets a 15 and a half, and I was so proud. You know, he catches this fish. First it fought like an upset largemouth bass. I mean, I knew we were on big crappies.
Sure thought he had a largemouth.
No, because like we had some upper 13s at the same time out of the same school. And I see the fish go by the hole, and I'm like, Adam, like his name was Adam as well. I'm like, dude, you have a giant crappie on. He's like, what? I'm like, it's a big, and it's pull and drag. And we see it again. We're only on 8-9 inches of ice. We finally get it up a 6-inch hole. It got stuck pretty much coming up. And without hesitation, he was not keeping it.
Yeah.
Like right away. And he's like, what do we do with this? I'm like, well, you're not going to eat it. He goes, no, I'll let it go. And I'm like, you know, we'll get a replica of it someday. We took a bunch of pictures. He can do this and that and that. And he was just proud. He gets his pictures, lets it go, super excited. Not a thought in his brain to keep it. And he was keeping fish for dinner. Like it wasn't even a thought in his brain. He just had either watching you guys, watching us, watching whatever, was like, no, this is a 2-pound fish, this trophy fish. And it was funny because you come off the adrenaline rush and the high fives and this and that. And I think for the next 20 minutes, we're like, man, that was a nice one. Oh, that's, you know. And later that night, I drop him off with my snow dog on land to his car, give him a high five saying, congrats again, man, that was awesome. He's like, yeah, I don't know if it's really sunk in yet, you know, whatever. And you talk about the memory of the fish. Is later that evening, he texts me and he's like, I didn't realize how big that was until I'm seeing these comments on social media.
Yeah.
Where everyone's like, holy crap, bro. Like that's a wall mounter. Like that's a trophy. Like and he's just like, but in his mind, to your point, he's like, I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that battle. It took me 3 minutes to reel in a freaking crappie.
Yeah.
You know, in 15, 16 feet of water. And to this day, I mean, I talk to him often. He always comments and he's just like, still like, I'm not going to top that, am I? I'm not going to top that. I'm not going to. And I had another guy with me who fishes a decent amount, good client of mine, and his PB was 14 inches. Mm-hmm. And he's caught a lot of fish. And the look in his face was just like, man, I have chased crappies all over the state, hot bites and Bemidji and everything. And dude over here using the pinhead for the first time, Jack's a 15.5-inch freak.
Yeah.
But the memory is really what does it. But I got him good pictures, and he's already talked about getting a replica. Picture will adorn the wall right next to the replica. And that's a win-win, in my opinion. A win-win scenario, for sure.
It's just, you just need the replica. And I think it's so much better, too, because it's like, you don't need to go rush in and like get it in to get done and everything to preserve it or wrap it in a towel or I don't know, whatever you have to do with the regular mount, right? You get home. Like I have the dimensions of a largemouth I caught like 6 years ago on film with Sobe that I'm probably going to get a replica of in the next year or two because I was like, I'll catch one bigger, and I still haven't.
That was a baby gorilla.
Yeah, it was a 656 and it was only like 20.5 inches long, but it's like the most beautiful, pristine 20.5 inch largemouth. It was like 16.5 or 17-inch girth. Like it was just round. And it's just a beautiful fish. And I'm like, you know what? I'll probably get a replica of that. And you don't have to do it immediately. So that's the only thing. Like people hear us preach about it a lot, and I just really want to make sure we do, because you might not think you have that big of an effect on a fishery, but you also have to think about, like, if there's 10 other people who think like you when you're like, I'm not going to have that big of an effect, I'm just going to take this. Like I said, there's not 100, 200, 300 18-inch crappies in a lake. We're fishing for like 15 of them on a good lake.
Yeah.
People keep 10 of them in a winter, they're gone.
Yeah.
Like you can't do it anymore. So it's just get a replica, put it back, and those genetics are a real thing. Like we showed that off on when we filmed our red video. Griff and Ryan both caught 14-inch crappies. One of them was long and lean, long and thin. The other was a square. And you're like, genetics are real. Like that's not because this fish has been eating a lot. It's this fish is built completely differently than this fish is. That's the big thing on genetics. And putting those big, like an 18-inch crappie, for example. I mean, Matt, you've maybe seen pure strain blacks or whites that have been around there at times, but like 90% of the time that's a hybrid.
Right.
Get those hybrid genetics back in. Like those are very important.
In a replica, I have both on the wall. A real fish and a replica, I'll be honest. replicas just look so much better.
Yeah,
I
so
have
much
real
better.
fish that I got when I was younger, and they're starting to look beat up and ratted. I got replicas that I've had for 20 years that look the exact same as when I got them, to a T.
Yeah, you can clean them off easy.
Exact same.
Yeah, big thing.
So well, that's good advice. I think that's a good preaching moment, is letting them go get in a replica. And it's easy. And the replica guys that do this now, they love it. It's not
They'd
just a
way
job.
rather do
it's,
a
it's a
replica.
work of art. It's
Yeah.
not just a job for them. It's really, really something cool. They work with you along the way. The guy that I use will message me every few weeks as he's working on it, like, hey, check out this. I got this tail pattern done. What do you think? Like, they get as excited about it as you do. They want to immortalize your catch in every way, shape, or form that you would be happy of. So these
They
guys
want to
do
make
a great
your
job.
fish your fish.
100%.
And so they can make it that with their
Right.
art, their art
Right.
skills, let them do their thing. So
Yeah.
and that's huge.
Okay.
I agree.
Speaking of that, I may need a replica guy.
Yeah, well, I know someone.
I would love to get a sturgeon replica someday.
Yeah,
If I can ever crack a 70.
you got to be
What
pretty
would
close.
pricing on
Dude,
that
it'd be
be?
so much, man. I wanted to get a 42.5-inch pike replica, and I was like, oh, God, I
It's-
can't pay for that.
It's usually about
70
$12 an inch is
It'd
about
be
the
a
going
couple
rate.
grand at least.
Yeah, and that's just for the fish. That's not for driftwood or rock or.
Yeah.
It's about $12 an inch you can expect, but there is a minimum. So if you get like a 10-inch bluegill, they're probably going to charge you $250, $300.
Yeah, I
So,
think that.
so there is a minimum, but like you get a 30-inch walleye, usually you can expect $360, $400. Put a piece of driftwood, you might spend $500, but you can't go to dinner with your girlfriend for less than $100.
No,
So
I mean,
now
dude,
you
we
can
went
just
to a meat raffle Saturday.
Yeah,
We spent
you
like
can just
$60.
you can skip
Great.
3 dinners with Sarah.
I don't know
and
where
get
you
a
go to
replica.
dinner, man. I go to like the Legion.
Have you heard of Applebee's
Oh, yeah.
half-price apps?
Yeah,
Okay, so if you guys were to try to catch a 15-inch crappie, what kind of lake would you target? Would you target like a deep water, northern, clear, natural lake? Would you target a lake with stunted fish with the odd chance that there's like a couple giant freaks that just grew bigger than the rest and are cannibalizing the fish? Or would you target a winter kill lake?
Winter kill,
Really?
1,000%, zero doubt in my mind.
agreed.
Yeah, I love fishing winter kill lakes because I don't know what I'm going to get into. I could catch a bunch of 3-inch crappies, or you never know when you can catch just a giant.
Because when a lake winter kills, it doesn't
It's the-
kill everything.
It's the best thing. in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, it doesn't
we
kill
had
everything.
we had so many partial winter kills last year, and that just adds into like I've said, this year is so good. It's just like there's lakes I was fishing the last 10 years of my life that have been just so many stunted fish in them that you're like, oh God, like someone needs to zap this place, like we need to get some of this out of here. This isn't good. Well, and then last winter happened, and we go back this winter, and you're like, Dead Sea, like panning around. And then all of a sudden you get to kind of the corner where there's life or like whatever's going on. And you're like, oh, these fish are now acting like they're not in a lake with a ton of stunted fish. They are the predators. They get to chase the bait now, and they're acting right. But yeah, I would say if I wanted to get a 15, a winter kill lake for sure. It is hard to discount northern Minnesota. Because with what we do, trying to document an 18, like they're not. I mean, someone will prove me wrong, but there's not that many 18s north of.
I would agree.
I don't know, Garrison.
I would
Like
agree with
probably
you.
around there. There's not very many. There is a ton of 14 to 15 and 3/4. Ton of them. But like even people are like, oh, I caught a 16 on red. Close the mouth
Measure it,
and moving it
yeah.
up on the bump board. It's probably 15 and a quarter, and it's a great fish. Like that is a huge crappie. It's over 2 pounds. Like that's giant. But you can definitely get that in northern Minnesota. I just think you run into a little bit more of potential barrow trauma, and I know that's an extremely hot topic right now in fishing. But something, even Aaron has said and we say is like, we still don't put ourselves in that situation to have to make that decision. So I don't go chase fish that deep. And I think winter kill lakes are great because you never really have to worry about it. And they grow super fast.
And anglers leave them alone.
Yes.
I love when somebody says, oh man,
They're hard
that,
work.
that lake's
Well, you
winter
just-
killed. It's like,
the
yes, it
DNR
is.
report
Yes.
doesn't have
And then
the
you smile
latest
and go, I'm going
survey,
there.
so you don't even know.
Yeah.
Like, the last survey they had 5 years ago, they didn't catch a single crappie.
those surveys sometimes. All the lakes I've caught my biggest crappies on, the DNR survey shows nothing.
Yeah. Yep.
Consistently.
We've got some very big ones.
It shows next to nothing. And that's where I've caught my biggest crappies on lakes where it shows almost non-existing crappies, or just 7 to 9 inches are in there, and that's it.
Yep.
Back to like the fish genetic thing. I feel like the fish also, I agree that the genetics are extremely important, but like they also need a lot of food to grow. Like,
Yeah.
I've heard of studies that, people take a fish out of a stunted pond, throw them somewhere in Iowa in like a different farm pond where there's no other bluegills, and they just grow massive because they have so much bait to eat.
Yeah.
They have no competition. That's kind of what a winter kill, like what happens there, right? Like you have a bunch of fish, then all of a sudden half of them die, and then there's just more room. There's more biomass to get.
Yeah, just think about
More
like
food to eat.
Yeah,
I don't know. Think about being in a food court, right? Like if there's 50 of you in there doing pretty good, you can eat whenever you want. You go get in line, you get your food, everything's great. All of a sudden you got 500 in there, still eating pretty good, having to wait a little bit, but you're doing all right.
Or maybe your skip lunch.
Yeah, maybe you skip lunch.
I'll just skip.
Now you put 5,000 people in that food court. There's a couple of you that are eating really good. The rest of you are skipping meals. Now you're trying to go there in the middle of the night because there's nobody else in line and everything's jacked up and all that. And now suddenly half of you die and then you're right back to it. That's kind of like the best theory. It's kind of like the best way I can equate that, right? That's the way it works. Because there's only a certain amount of food, no matter how fertile a lake is, there's only so much food it can put out.
Oh, for sure.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting to see, but I think you are spot on. This winter is one thing I always tell people about this ice fishing season. A couple key things that come to mind. One is adapt.
Yeah.
And that has to do with ice conditions, maybe the bite location, maybe the lake, is be willing to adapt this year. You're not used to some of the things we're seeing. The other big one that I continue to preach and I think is worth noting, we mentioned the 3 first ices. You need to do your own checking. I think that's so important to check for yourself. I am seeing more and more people and machines going through on lakes on social media than ever. And I think it comes down to we just get complacent and we assume everything's okay. Or I just did it the other day. We're seeing freak conditions in terms of weather right now.
Yeah.
Something none of us that ice fish anywhere in Minnesota have ever experienced in their lifetime. So my big push now is for anyone listening and watching, there is more ice fishing ahead of us. This isn't the end. Everyone thinks this is it. The season's over. Like we are going to get some cold temps behind this next few really warm days.
The ice we have right now is not going nearly as rapidly as I assumed it would.
It's holding, but you still need to go out there, do due diligence. Don't just hop on your ATV and rip out to the lake because it's February 10th next week. Take a look, check for yourself. Do a little bit of that sort of stuff, and you'll have a successful day of ice fishing.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, the ice is cracking weird too right now. Like middle of the day, you'll notice there'll be like a gap in the ice like that, and you're just like, glad I wasn't ripping a snowmobile 50 across here, and like, not that I wouldn't make it, hopefully, but just to like make sure that nothing weird happens even when you're on the lake. Yep. Even if the ice is a foot thick or whatever, just doing weird stuff.
Don't take any risk in common sense.
It's pretty easy to walk around right now, guys.
Yeah.
Like it's not that bad. It's a very easy winter for dragging a fish trap behind you, and there's plenty of them on sale. You can go grab one and just walk around with it. So that we tow a Scout around, even an X100 this year hasn't been very hard because there's literally no snow cover. So it's very easy to do, and then you don't necessarily have to worry about as much, in terms of your investment, but obviously be safe and check all those things. The biggest thing I always preach, because people say spud bar and all that sort of stuff, the most important thing by far, in my opinion, this year is ice picks, because the one thing I will always say, and especially this year with no snow, is, okay, say you do go in, how are you getting out? And it's very hard to get out without ice picks.
Yeah,
so
especially on glare ice.
So just have ice picks on you. I mean, Griff and I had them on the other day. We were out on 10, 11 inches, but we're running around scoping, doing our thing, and all of a sudden I pop a hole in one place. I look at him. I'm like, dude, that's like 4.5. Where'd that come from? Like, there's 10 inches everywhere else. Yep. I have no idea where this came from. So that's a part of what's going on lakes right now. And like Matt said, there's still a ton of ice fishing. It's going to cool down again. and it's going to be a great season. It's just, I think people should, with how weird the weather is this year, it's warm, it's nice out, you can go do stuff, go somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, go somewhere you've wanted to go. Travel conditions are insanely easy right now in terms of like getting to places. Go somewhere and go enjoy a trip. Like, that's like we've talked about, right, with the replicas and like the travel of the Chronicles and filming it. What you remember fishing most times is the stories and the whole adventure of it all. Go take one. Yeah. Go take a little adventure for a weekend, 4 or 5 days with your buddies, 3 days, whatever it is. Just go somewhere you've always wanted to go and
make an adventure.
Enjoy it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we could talk forever, and we were talking for an hour and 25 minutes.
Fishing, dude.
I know.
God.
Yeah.
Have to do an open water ice team podcast.
We could talk a little bass fishing with Adam at another time. I think he could twist his arm.
Yeah, me and Noah could come in. We can chat bass fishing next week.
That guy's a wizard.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate it. So when can they expect? You teased us like 5 times in this podcast about some epic content coming out.
I don't know when this podcast is coming out, so that's
I think we can get this podcast tomorrow evening or early Wednesday.
So there should be an episode coming out Wednesday or Thursday that it will rival Weeb's video. I will say that. Yeah. Well, I've talked to Aaron about it already. It'll rival that.
Okay, and they can follow you guys.
And with that said, there's more filmed. Like, I thought that was the best day I was ever gonna have on the ice, and I was wrong. So like, there's a lot more coming. I don't necessarily know how it's gonna get put out over the next month or maybe even next fall, but it's coming. There's a lot of really great crappie content coming.
But social media is going to blast this out before. There's going to be teaser videos, all that good stuff, so they'll know when it's coming, right?
Yeah, I think I only got one more teaser in me. Otherwise, people might get kind of mad. So
okay,
I kind of teased everybody in the video last night pretty good, and I got enough DMs of people being like, "Really?"
So keep an eye out.
Yeah, they're coming.
And maybe by the time you listen to this, it's already out, and you'll know what we're talking about. But Adam, thank you so much. Thanks for everything you do for the industry. You're doing a lot of great things, and hopefully you get out there and catch a few more big ones.
Yeah.
Did you get an 18?
I can't tell you that. I would never even. That's the one thing, like we've said on our own podcast and everything. That'll never be teased. It'll never be anything.
Yeah.
Like nobody has any idea how that I will unveil that, because I don't know. People have grabbed on to different music or different postings or different way we do things for big fish. So the one thing I'm trying to do now is to continually change it. Like, if we get an 18, there is a very real chance I'll all of a sudden just drop the video.
So there's a good chance that Adam will have high blood pressure and be visiting the local hospital. They got an 18-incher.
Yeah. We've gotten some very, very, very big fish. So yeah.
Well,
we're gonna keep chasing it. I mean, they're around.
Yeah,
and they're showing up a lot this year.
I'm excited.
You might not see them on social media, but I would say the behind the scenes text thread of the guys who chase really big crappies around the state, it's been pretty on fire the last like week and a half. So
it's good. Sweet. Well, I'm excited to see it, dude. Thanks so much for hopping on here, Drew. As always, thanks for helping out.
Yep.
Another episode of the Ice Team Podcast. We had the one and only Bart. Follow along Bart on YouTube. That's where the Chronicles are always being placed. Make sure you hop on there, follow, and subscribe so you can see all this good stuff. And be safe out there, man, and have a good rest of your ice season.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thanks for having me on. Brother. Appreciate it. Appreciate everyone who listens and watches. And, yeah, just continue to support sponsors and everybody who let these shows go on, because as much as I love to do this for fun and passion projects, I do have to pay for a house now. So
totally get it.
Welcome.
Thanks again. Everyone have a good ice fishing season.